Barth, you talked about the cosmic web and its cosmic currents. Where are
I'm sorry, say that again?
the cosmic web and
Yes.
the cosmic currents?
Yes.
Where are the batteries for the currents?
How did it all begin?
Everybody, to a man, always asks me that question. I'll give you two answers. Picture two fish swimming around in the middle of the Mississippi River. And one of them looks at the other and says, "Joe, where in hell does all this water come from?" And sure, just think, we're fish, and we're asking, what's the precipitation over the Rocky Mountains that makes the snow? It's a very, very complicated question. But the other answer to it is, yes, there is no battery out there in space. I know NASA put out a slide one time, said that there needed to be a 30,000 volt battery simply to put the Birkeland current from the sun into the Earth. The Earth's a pretty tiny planet compared to Jupiter and Saturn. So just if it's 30,000 volts to put it into the Earth, there must be gazillion volts to put it into Jupiter. There's no battery out there. It's the dynamo effect. I hate that word, but that's what astronomers use. Oh, there was a dynamo that did this. Dynamo is the name of the Russian soccer team, as far as I know. The only time anybody used the real genesis of the word dynamo was back in the days when it was a DC generator. And if it generates, the inherent generation that occurs inside the dynamo is AC. And then there's a commutator and slip rings and all that sort of thing that makes it sort of constant when it comes out. So that's a dynamo. What they really mean is induction. And that is, as I said, I think the other day, that if in any geometry you can kludge up, you arrange for relative motion to occur between a conductor and a magnetic field, there will be current induced in that conductor. The conductor might be a wire, might be a plasma. The wire may be moving and the magnetic field static or reverse. So that's where it all comes from. Everything in space is in motion. And parenthetically, I'll add as a little advertisement, it spins too. Where does the spin come from? From the Big Bang? Hell no. Anything that goes out, this way, it doesn't go out that way, typically, unless there's some anomaly in there. So the idea that, I guess, let me shut up and say that I think the answer to your question is, where does it come from? It comes from induction. In fact, that there's moving magnetic fields and plasmas out there. And that's another thing that astronomers, one more thing, then I'll shut up, that astronomers have been saying for decades, and that is that plasmas are frozen into magnetic fields. And somebody alluded to that, I think it was Wall or somebody. That's from one of Maxwell's equations, that the dB/dt, if there is no E field allowed, the curl of E is equal to minus dB/dt plus whatever.
Zero, yeah.
If the electric field itself is zero, then its curl is zero, and therefore dB/dt must be zero. Okay? But I'm sorry, Sapphire has proven that we can get 8,000 volts per meter of electric field inside a plasma. And so plasma is not frozen into an electric field, or vice versa. Electric field frozen into plasma. And
But it can still be dragged along to an extent.
Yes, under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
But generally, that's a phony argument, and so induction does occur, and where does all this motion come from? God knows. I mean, that's the way the universe works. Everything's moving with respect to everything else, and everything's spinning and twisting, and when they intersect, that's where it comes from. Sorry to be so long-winded.
Thank you. As a sort of bystander, I've been watching the suspicious observers every day with great fascination, and Ben Davidson talks about the Earth facing quiet, which one can see quite easily in the films from the satellites.
You mean the sun being becoming
The solar
quiet sun?
Earth facing quiet.
Yeah.
So the sunspots are active when they're not facing Earth, and then they quieten down as they face Earth, and then they become very active again as they're moving away from Earth. I wondered if you could have an electric universe explanation for that.
I think I have a slide that I was going to show you, but I spoke so much, to use so many words that I ran over my time and I didn't show you half my presentation. I think that was in the last half. The idea, I've heard Ben talk many times, and I agree with most of what he said. But the thing where I disagree slightly is, I think in the, what should I say, I don't think he is trying to engender fear in anybody, but I do hear this, oh, there is a coronal hole. Okay, now, first of all, rest easy. Coronal holes are just places where, in the bottom of the corona, over the surface of the sun's photosphere, where there are no disturbances, no sunspots, no coronal mass ejections. So what you've got, in my mind, is under a coronal hole is the normal sun. Where the whoopee business starts is when you start to get a sunspot.
Yes.
And then you've got a break in the dam there. There is no photospheric structure holding back a flood of ions that want to come out. So it seems to me if Ben wants to get excited about something, it should be over the slow solar wind, which is 3 times as voluminous as the fast solar wind. So it's kind of like, would you rather be hit by a mosquito or a trailer truck? The mosquito goes fast, but he doesn't do very much. That's my analogy. It's not really applicable. But,
Could I ask you a question or a comment? It was just on that point about the sunspots getting less active as they moved away from facing the Earth. I'm not sure if that's consistent, if it is in fact always true, but they are changing a lot all the time. I mean, there may be something in what it says, but I think, as Don says, you know, that isn't necessarily a big deal. More interestingly is things like when there was that gigantic earthquake in Japan and the tsunami, there was a major Earth-facing coronal hole, and those often coincide with big earthquakes. But I wanted to make this into a question to Don about the scale of Birkeland currents, because I mean, are Birkeland currents in preferred sizes, you see, and why is it that we have stars of one size and then the next size up mostly is galaxies, and there's very little in between? I mean, do Birkeland currents like to be, you know, particular scales, and that is it, because otherwise we'd have a more kind of mixed up universe than we do have.
of course, right away my answer is I have no idea. but the fact that things come in quantized amounts, sometimes it's just things come in quantized amounts. I think it was Wall or somebody referred to the quantization of the redshift.
We did, yeah, but I wonder if you had more to add to that, basically.
No, I mean, I have no idea what the mechanism of that quantization is, why the causation of it, I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I mean,
one of
I
the
recognize that it exists.
One of the puzzles of astronomy is why the stars have the seeming limit
Yeah.
on their size.
Yeah.
Well, we can suggest an answer with the electrogravity model where you get to a certain
Right.
point and the repulsive forces inside exceed the compressive forces from outside.
Okay.
Yeah, elephants only grow so large.
That's yeah.
Don, I've got a question for you. Over here.
No, okay.
Going back to your answer earlier on about where the potential difference comes from in space, we're talking about everything moving, so it's induction. But where do the magnetic fields come from to move through? are they, I mean, everybody, most electrical engineers know that you don't get a magnetic field without movement of charge, current flow. So we've got a kind of a circular argument there. Can you have one without the other?
No, exactly. If you look at Maxwell's equations, there's B, and which is H, which is the same thing, and E. So you've got electromagnetic fields and, electric fields and magnetic fields. And you're absolutely right, it's a circularity, there's a circular argument there.
Yeah.
But which came first, I don't know. Did it snow on top of the Rockies before the Mississippi River? Or?
I think part of the problem is we assume that, or we've been taught that the universe is a closed system.
Somewhere it is.
We have, that's just an assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if Helton Up is right, that we're part of something of unknown age and unknown extent, then we cannot treat it as a closed system. All we can say is that within the visible universe, we measure intergalactic magnetic fields, which were a surprise. Interstellar magnetic fields, that was a surprise. It shouldn't be.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Who takes it?
Oh.
Any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, another one. I have a question for Jeremy. You mentioned it's kind of about.
Have we finished?
Thanks, Don.
Taking the chair, sir.
Thanks, Piers.
One of the things I think we're all aware of is the sort of elevated status that Einstein was given, has been given. Obviously, part of the reason, in part, he's almost been beatified. I was really interested in what you said about Stephen Hawking, and as morbid a point as it is, I thought it was really interesting about the death of Stephen Hawking opening up opportunities within science to say what was maybe being unsayable whilst his presence, while he was present. And I wondered whether you'd like to elaborate on that, because I think in the context of the electric universe, it's a sort of sociology of science point that's really important. I just wondered what you specifically saw might be an opportunity that we could grasp in this context.
Well, thank you for putting it so nicely, because when I said I felt guilty about saying that, about the death of Stephen Hawking, I've got to be honest, I genuinely did mean it. Let me make it clear to everybody, if you haven't heard me say it already. From the point of view of the man, I didn't like the way he acted towards people, but I had the greatest deal of admiration for him in the way he coped with that rather ghastly condition from which he suffered for so many years. But then as a scientist, I think you've got to dissociate the two. And first of all, I still don't know why he's been elevated as he has. If somebody can tell me, I'm quite willing to listen, but I still don't know. Some years ago, there was a new publication came out over here, which has been taken over by the IOP, so it's no longer worth reading. And that is The Public Understanding of Science. And in the first issue of that journal, somebody wrote an article called The Hawking Phenomenon. And when you read it, it was actually a talk purely about his book, A Brief History of Time. And when I read this, I was so furious at what I read that I immediately ripped off a letter, even though there wasn't a letters page for the journal, and sent it off, saying, if you've got a letters page, this is for it. And I really did let rip, that's to put it mildly. I then had a phone call, as I said, this was before the IOP took it over. I then had a phone call from the assistant editor, and she said, oh, we've just got 3 questions for you. And I thought, aye, here we go. The first question was, what is your Christian name? Because we always put Christian names on contributions. I don't know what the second question was. It was something equally trivial. And then the third question was, about halfway through you said something. Don't you really mean something else? And I said, well, yes, I said, I do mean it. It was something really, really, really outspoken about the situation of Hawking and the book. And I said, well, yes, I do. But I mean, I said, you know, are you allowed to say that in public? And she said, well, it's you that's putting your head above the parapet. So I actually replied and said, look, dear, I'm not putting my head above the parapet, I'm standing on the damn thing. And she said, well, if I send you some modified wording, will you glance through it and get back to me? So I duly get this modified wording to this article, which just was exactly my article, but with this laid out very, very clearly. And it duly appeared. There's never been one syllable of comment because you've got a system, and the way it operates is this. If you do manage to get something published that goes against conventional wisdom, and you disagree with it, you keep your mouth shut, because then it'll go away, which it does. Now, with the Stephen Hawking thing, if you go back and actually read A Brief History of Time, he gives a history in there of the, let's be honest about it, the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy expression for a black hole. And in the book he says, when Bekenstein came out with this formula, I rejected it, it was a load of rubbish. But after 2 years, I dreamt up an idea for a temperature, and so I accepted it. So it became the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy expression, even though Hawking had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Now we go on to Hawking's second book, The Universe in a Nutshell. Now, by this time, you see, most of Hawking's mistakes, or the ones I've come across, are to do with thermodynamics and statistical mechanics, because he doesn't know anything about them, or he didn't know anything about them. And I'm not being sarcastic in saying that. I mean, a friend of mine from the University of Camerino in Italy, he's an American actually, and the reason he was in Italy is a long and complicated story. But he was a big man in statistical thermodynamics, and I'd always worked in thermodynamics, so we were looking at it from a position of knowledge, and we found so many mistakes in Hawking's papers where he had thermodynamics and statistical mechanics coming in. But we find in The Universe in a Nutshell that he'd evidently learnt something about Boltzmann, and knew that when Boltzmann died, he had his famous formula for the entropy engraved on his tombstone. So in The Universe in a Nutshell, Hawking now says that he wants the entropy expression for a black hole carved on his tombstone. But if you look through A Universe in a Nutshell, including the index, there isn't one mention of Bekenstein. The end result is that there was only a quick glance on television when they were interring Hawking's ashes in Westminster Abbey. A very brief one. But the brief glimpse I had, I'm damn certain that entropy expression was carved on that tombstone. Now, Hawking is gone. He had a tremendous influence in this country and abroad. Big publicity thing. I think it goes back so many years, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember that my wife, who is not a scientist, my wife, just looking in on it, made the comment that she thought that there was a sort of a group around him using his name to get some of their ideas published. Now, sadly, Hawking has died, but I think it does offer a possible window of opportunity, no more, but a possible window of opportunity. The thing is, will the hangers-on retain the power that they had when he was alive? If they do, then we'll continue to not have the contrary stuff published. If they don't, there's a good chance we will, and we'll get away from all these nonsenses. And it's all very well if you've got a nonsense like the existence of black holes. I think it's about time that when they put pictures of black holes on television or on the or in magazines, I think it's about time they did correctly put down artist's impression. But we want to get away from these ridiculous amounts of expenditure on the Large Hadron Collider, LIGO, and or whatever the third one is. I can't remember the name now. I mean, as I said, if you think about it, there's so much money put into these experiments. They've got to find what they say they want to find. I'm sorry, but they've got to find it. And I mean, I don't know what stories you've heard, but for example with the Large Hadron Collider, oh, we found the Higgs boson. Oh, we'll give you a Nobel Prize for it. Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I heard they found 2. So
You mean different energies?
No wrong mass.
Or
Yeah.
the wrong mass? Oh,
yeah, something like that. Yeah. So I'm
No.
I'm not quite sure what they're supposed to have found. So I'm sorry, but the older I get, the more sceptical I get of the whole lot. But I do think, sadly from one point of view, Hawking's death might produce a window of opportunity. Is that any use?
I want to make a comment that kind of reminds me of what happened to Robert Hooke with the inverse square law, because, you know,
Well, Hooke,
everyone ascribed it to Newton.
yeah, but Hooke was done in by Newton.
Yeah, but he had, I think, because Newton had a better image, maybe a nicer wig, you know, like Einstein kind of fulfilled some kind of need, in that he looked like a crazy scientist. Hawking looked almost like a disembodied mind, he fulfilled some kind of emotional need. Or something.
No, I always went back to the eagle. I always went back to the eagle, actually, if any of you remember that comment. Because Dan Dare going to Venus, Dan Dare going to Venus, his main enemy was the Mekon, who was largely a disembodied head floating on a little...
It was, yeah, it was. On a little flying...
That's it.
A tablet!
Oh, Piers, you're not going to put that one around now that I've said that, are you?
But I've got a comment about Hawking as well.
Sorry, there's somebody at the back.
Sorry.
In case it's for me to...
Yes, I think the underlying problem is that we have a society which is based upon the cult mentality. And I think that with Hawkins participating in quite a lot of popular culture, sort of created this mythos around him, and obviously his supporters promoted this idea. Part of me starts to think how much, at what point did Hawkins, during his later years, was subjected to perhaps being hacked, in the sense of his speaking, sort of copyrighted speech machine may have been utilised. How do we know? Just throwing that one out there. But I think we can all agree that we have a situation with a cult mentality, and it's a sociological issue, and I think it's a pop culture issue. And I think it's kind of a weird paradox, but maybe the EU needs to adopt a similar kind of action, sort of social media, and trying to get it into the public realm by means of popular culture. So music, film, TV, trying to get people into those positions who might be following the EU, who are in those sort of positions in those media groups and companies to feed it through the narrative.
I should point out that Don Scott's big love is opera. So if you think that we can get to opera,
just one final point. I think that obviously adopting these tactics would be useful, but obviously we want to avoid being seen as a cult as well.
To adopt the tactics is to create the same result.
That's a very good point. But
but you're
just switch on.
you're the one that's on, so
When
you
we,
stay there.
Sorry? When we called for this meeting, Lucy and I didn't know who you all were, where you were. We didn't know how many of you would turn up. We could only sort of just hope, you know, cross fingers and hope that something would take off. Now, I do think we need to build some kind of a society, whatever you want to call it, a college, a society, whatever the term should be, and maybe have the senior members, people like Don and Wall and so on, to set a syllabus of basic EU teachings because I mean, someone could say, oh yes, I'm into the EU, and then they can spout a lot of nonsense, which they've half gleaned off watching a few Thunderbolts programmes. I'm thinking of myself, right? But could have a sort of course that you could follow, and then when you've completed your course, it says EU Scholar or something,
Like
right?
the Academy or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Academician, so some kind of label that you can have a little badge, you
Where is
know?
the Academy?
And then it becomes aspirational for certain people in the mainstream to want to be part of it, because they're being left out. They don't have the little label that says they're an academician. They are just, well, they're just an Oxford and Cambridge graduate or whatever, you know. They're not one of us. And as this becomes more and more cool to be involved in, and it will be. It is already, but it's going to explode. They're going to want to be said, well, I want to be recognised as one of you guys that can speak knowledgeably about this. You say, right, well, you must do the course. You must submit your paper, and then you'll get your academician. Does that make sense to people?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Can I have a comment?
Always one.
Can I have a comment on that? Well, I think that is a goal, I think. But I think it's more for discussion tomorrow, is my understanding. But I think we definitely should pursue that. But where it would leave astrologers, I don't know, because they, you know, it's good to have them around.
That as well.
Indeed. Okay. I was going to make another comment about Hawking. First of all, a statistical silly thing, if you like. My physics teacher in secondary school, at an earlier school, he also taught Stephen Hawking. Now that happened to a lot of students who he taught of, if you think about it. But anyway, interesting fact. Second thing is, I did listen to his lectures, Stephen Hawking's lectures, and they were very, you know, interesting but difficult to understand. A third thing I want to say is that, and I think what Lee said is really very, you know, important. We should understand how, you know, figures get treated and used by authorities. In his life, Stephen Hawking never said anything at all about man-made climate change and all that stuff until the last 2 or 3 years of his life, when suddenly he's popped up on BBC to tell everybody it must be true because I'm Stephen Hawking and therefore everything I say is true, so you've got to believe in man-made climate change. And quite frankly, he knew nothing about it, and had he studied it, he would, as an intelligent person, he would know it's nonsense. But he allowed his name to be used, and subsequently he was buried in Westminster Abbey. Okay. It's not. This is the not moving light.
The mic's up the back.
This is the anchored light.
It's yeah. Well, this might be an off remark of some kind, but when you mentioned astrology and Hawking's, well, Stephen Hawking's dismissed astrology on the simple grounds that planetary gravity is too small, so how could astrology work? That was his reason for a total dismissal, and the whole world applauded, you know. and he said that in India, you know. Well, anyway, that's the cynical part of it. But anyway,
that's a good point.
Well, anyway, what I wanted to say is that no astrologer ever claimed that gravity is the reason for, you know, why astrology works. Just so much for.
Yes.
So we have never. This is not the reason why it works. It has to do with, you know, the synchronicity, you know, as above so below, like with the interconnectedness, not with gravity. This is the reason why I, after hearing that, his opinion, I never read any of his books, because I say, well, Stephen Hawking obviously, you know, makes claims that he's not based on the lack of information. So why would I, you know, trust such persons? So, thank you. That's all I have to say.
I think that's all about all we've got time for. Lunch is about 2 or 3 minutes away. If there's maybe one final question, very, very quick. Okay.
One at the back.
Just a
just a very quick question for Pierce.
Hello, yeah.
In regards to your talk about the carbon dioxide, if it is the gas of life and then all the stuff we hear is not true, is there any such thing as the runaway greenhouse effect?
No. Completely, absolutely no. And that is witnessed by the fact we are here. Because the carbon dioxide levels in historical past were often 20 times, even 100 times what they are now. And the world did not have runaway warming then. Had it done so, all life would have got fried.
So what about on Venus?
Venus is warm not because of any carbon dioxide in it, it's because it's got a large atmosphere. You saw the diagram of the lapse rate. If you double the amount of atmosphere on Earth, then the surface temperature will go up because the height of the atmosphere goes up and the level at which radiation departs into space will go up. Venus has got an enormous atmosphere. Basically, surface temperature depends on atmospheric mass.
Thank you. Just a quickie. The electric.
Is this for me or? Oh, right.
One of the standard beliefs of the electric universe people, from its founders onward. Hello. Oh, and okay. Is that Venus is hot, not because of the size of its atmosphere, but rather because it's a latecomer to the planetary collection. And the originality, the genesis, if you will, of this global warming thing, as far as I know, came from Carl Sagan, who was totally embarrassed by the finding the fact that Venus was so hot. The melting point of lead is beyond that. I mean, it's not a place to go. When I was a kid, in fact, when I was in college and taking an astronomy course, Venus was our sister planet. It was just our size. It was slightly warmer. Yeah, 800 degrees warmer. So the astronomers, to cover their embarrassment, had to come up with some rationality, and there was some rational answer for why did this happen. And that's what they came up with, was this global warming garbage.
Sure. Well, under electric universe views, there will be energy flows into planets and therefore consequences for temperatures. But in the long run, those might change how the atmosphere is. But the model I said about a planet's temperature depends, I would say, almost 100% on the atmospheric mass, is borne out by analysis of all the planets and the moons in the solar system. And this has been put across in various places by Ned Nikolov, for example. And we're going to have a conference in Porto, a climate realist conference in Porto, where we're going into numbers of aspects of the nonsense of man-made climate change, but more about the real way forward in climate and weather. And I think it's on the look on our website anyway, Porto, round about the 13th of September.
But here's,
Thank you. Yep.
if that's true, Venus, to my knowledge, is a hell of a lot hotter than Jupiter. And Jupiter's...
yeah, no, but it's got a much thicker atmosphere, you see. Well, also it's nearer the sun as well, so bear that in mind too.
Yeah, okay.
Are we good to break for lunch? Yeah.
We're breaking for lunch.
He just wants to keep going.
I'm keeping going. For lunch.